All right, so as many of you all may or may not know, I grew up in a single parent household, but I was raised by my father instead of my mother. My parents separated when I was 3 years old, but their divorce was finalized when I was 5. And it was rough seeing my parents separated, and every time they would come around and they would talk and be civil to one another, and I wanted to see that all the time. And it was 2 times they tried to make that actually work, but it just showed that although they could be civil, they could not live and be together. Like, that just would not work under any circumstances. And unfortunately, I saw a lot of verbal disagreements and arguments, and I also saw one physical argument, which was the last straw that they just couldn't be together under the same roof anymore. It hurt seeing my mom, in and out certain times, not always being able to see her as often as I wanted to. Not to say my dad kept me away from her. It was just certain times where she wasn't available or she was just out doing her own thing. Because one thing about my mom is not the homebody type, and she's the type that she's going to do what she wants to do, how she wants to do it, when she wants to do it. And nobody's going to stop her once her mind is made up. After the last time they were together, this was back in like 1989. I know it sounds like a long time. When she left, and then it was for a while I didn't have any idea where she was, Black Mamba creeped in. If you want to know who Black Mamba is, you can click on the card here or look in the link in the description below. But basically, and to make a long story short, every negative stereotype you could think about for a black woman, she hit all of them. I was cool with her kids, but I couldn't stand that woman. Fortunately, I think about a year later, my mom ended up moving 3 blocks away. So it gave me an escape to not only try to rekindle and rebuild things between me and my mom, because like I said, I was hurt that she wasn't always around and always accessible like I wanted her to be. It allowed us to be able to, kind of build on that relationship, but then also it allowed me an escape to not have to go over Black Mamba's house. I was very happy about that. The only time I couldn't go over my mom's house is if she was having company and they were going to be doing some adult things. But everything started changing when my mom became a Christian, because my mom became a Christian, and it also introduced me to it. And what made me want to accept it even then, because my mom apologized to me. She sat down and apologized for not always being around, not always being available, and the way and the behavior she was acting. Because like I said, she wanted to do her own thing whenever she wanted to do it, and it didn't matter, whoever else was affected, you just had to deal with it. So because of that, it helped us build on a relationship, and also it allowed a lot more honesty to come out. Because one of the biggest things that I used to hear conflicting between my parents is during a divorce, my dad always said that my mother didn't want me, but my mom would say that they took me away from her. The courts took me away. But then asking her one day about that, she came out and admitted. She said, now, my dad saying that she didn't want me, that's not accurate in a sense like, and she wished I was never born or something like that. But it was basically that my dad used to work night shift, and my mom basically used to be stuck in the house with me all night. And like I told you, my mom was not a homebody. So she said, even though it wasn't right for her to get revenge, gave custody to my dad because she wanted him to know what it felt like, that basically you can't do anything or go anywhere because you're stuck in the house with a child all the time. Even though ironically, people used to tell me that with my dad, that usually when you saw him get out of the car, he might have a beer in one hand, but he'll have me in a car seat in the other, and he took me everywhere he went, which was probably both good and bad, because I remember when him and his friends on Fridays or Saturday nights used to sit in the car, drink, and talk for hours. I used to hear a lot of things that probably at that age I shouldn't have been hearing at that time. But hindsight, looking back, it was very beneficial that I did hear it. Just all these things, just talking to my mom. But the key conversation came out of nowhere. It was one day just talking to my mom and telling her how my dad's always talking about this, that, and the other, and how bad black women are. Yet he ended up with this type of woman, Black Mamba. So I was confused. And my mother told me, she said, your dad is right that there are some bad black women out here that are only out here to use you, to destroy you, and these are women you don't want to get involved with. But she told me, but your father chose those women. And that helped me in 2 ways. It helped me, one, because 2 men that I loved and I looked up to, which was my father and my Uncle C. Seeing the type of men that they were and how I looked up to them, I was thinking to myself like, man, so these are the type of women I have to settle for? And I was thinking to myself, I just have to fall in line. But it let me know that, oh man, I have options and I don't have to just settle or deal with anything. But the other thing that my mother didn't know is it also let me know that I didn't have to marry a woman like her either. The mindset behind it is usually a man will marry a woman who reminds him of his mother. The characteristics and things that she has, especially if he had a good relationship with her. I didn't have the best relationship with my mom, and some of the things that my mom did, I didn't want to marry a woman like her. I love my mother. It's nothing against my mother, but I would never marry a woman like my mother. And I didn't. The only thing that my wife and my mom have in common is they're the only two women on the face of this earth that can say things that get under my skin, and they're both black. That's it. During that time while she was living there was one thing that I started picking up on. And one, my mom wasn't the best with relationships, just like my dad wasn't the best for relationships. And she ended up getting pregnant by a man who, I'll talk about this later, but my youngest brother was born. Because my family situation is this. I have an older sister where we have the same mother, different fathers. I have a brother I grew up with where we have the same father, different mothers. And then my youngest brother, who I haven't seen since he was 2 years old, we had the same mother, different fathers. And the father didn't even know he existed until it was time for my brother to be adopted, which leads us to what I'm going to say next. Back in 95, Child Protective Services came and took my brother away because as my mom got older, one thing that she never wanted to acknowledge is that usually during the holidays, she suffered from depression. That was something that my dad brought to my attention because my dad called my mother a lot of things. But one thing my dad never called my mom to my recollection is crazy. And he told me how usually during the holidays, she would get really depressed, get really down. And it wasn't until 95 that I started paying attention to that. But after they took my brother away, she kind of lost faith in, what she believed in. And then she disappeared. So from 1996 to 1999. Now, there were 2 times during that span that me and my dad did end up visiting her twice in St. Elizabeth, but she would say that nothing was wrong with her. And if anybody knows, St. Elizabeth is a mental hospital. But I did start noticing certain things, but I didn't hear from her. I didn't see her. So this is why for me growing up, it was hard because hearing songs like Dear Mama by Tupac, which came out in 95, and then also hearing a song for Mama by Boyz II Men, it was hard for me to relate because that's not what I experienced. Hearing people say, oh, I'm gonna call your mama. Go ahead and call my mama. Maybe you could tell me where she is because I have no idea. Being the oddball in my neighborhood, because usually in the neighborhoods I lived in, you either had a rare situation where you had both mother and father in the household, or you had a situation where the mother and father weren't together, but the dad would pick the kid up every other weekend, or it was just single mama or grandma. So for me to be one of the only males, whether in my school, my neighborhood, my school, wherever, to be raised by a single parent father, it was unheard of.